Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the misty, torchlit streets of the Middle Ages. It's a time when dinner is questionable. The beds are hard wooden slabs, and if you're carrying a bit of extra weight, well, let's just say those medieval benches aren't known for their kindness. You might walk away with a bruised ego or a bruised hip. But before we wander any further into this strange and quiet space, if it brings you even a little bit of peace, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd really love to know, where are you listening from? Are you lying in a quiet room at 2 a.m.? Or maybe you're just starting your morning in a gray, rainy city with eyes still heavy from sleep. Drop your time and place in the comments. We're not alone in this strange little corner of the night. Now, dim the lights. Let your shoulders sink. And together, let's drift into tonight's slow, dreamlike journey here on Sleepy Epoch. You're trudging through the muddy lanes of your village, cloak drawn tight against the chill. You hope no one notices how tightly it pulls across your belly. The air is thick with the scent of damp wood smoke, and something faintly cabbage-like. Every shuttered window seems to hide a pair of judgmental eyes. In the Middle Ages, being anything but thin and wiry is almost a scandal. There's no need for embroidery. Our body tells the story. Most around you are gaunt, even painfully so. Famine stops by often. Breadlines stretch longer than your patience, and even the wealthy have to plan ahead for hungry years. If you're carrying extra weight, it's not just seen, it's judged. Historians still argue whether being fat in medieval Europe ever meant you were well off or just unlucky. But the common attitude, if you're hefty, you must be greedy, lazy, or heaven forbid, cursed by God himself. After all, gluttony is one of the 7 deadliest sins, and your double chin is basically a wanted poster for spiritual crime. Let's paint the scene. It's market day. You squeeze through a crush of bodies. Farmers bartering, pigs squealing, children darting underfoot, and you catch a snippet of conversation. She eats well, that one, a woman mutters behind her hand, eyes fixed on you. The implication is clear. In a world where most bellies rumble with hunger, your roundness is practically criminal. A little voice in your head jokes that you're a walking, jiggling billboard for bread. But the laughter dies when you remember that in medieval society, food isn't just nutrition. It's morality, status, and reputation all bundled together. Eat too much, and you're not just fat. You're failing your community. And yet, here's the weird twist. Among the elite few, lords and wealthy merchants lucky enough to outlive famine, plumpness might pass as a symbol of wealth, but that luxury doesn't trickle down. For everyone else, especially women, carrying extra weight isn't just frowned upon, it's suspicious. Chroniclers occasionally mention well-fed monks or abbots, but only to mock them as bloated hypocrites. Brother Stephen's belt doesn't fit anymore. Someone jokes during supper. Everyone laughs, but you're not laughing. You're quietly testing if your own belt can be loosened one more notch without anyone noticing. This isn't just social awkwardness, it's doctrine. Medieval sermons warned that gluttony invited spiritual rot and physical ruin. In manuscripts and stained glass, the sign of excess often took the shape of a round, bloated figure, cheeks stuffed, eyes glazed over in thoughtless pleasure. The message was clear. God sees your midnight snack, and he's not smiling. Back then, your body wasn't. Privatite was public commentary. Your mother scolds you with a cluck and a sigh. The baker gives you that look when you reach for a second honey cake. Sometimes you wonder if rumors about you arrive before you dow whispers about what you eat when no one's watching. Medieval towns are small. Gossip is cheap. And everyone's bored. Let's not forget the bizarre trivia. While most people were desperate just to eat, a few were inventing diets for the sin of eating too much. There are records of people drinking vinegar, strapping their middles with tight belts, or choking down bitter herbs like sage and wormwood, because some ancestor swore it would melt the fat off. It didn't. What it did do was make you the least popular person at group prayer, especially when the wormwood kicked in. Historians still debate whether these were genuine health attempts or just creative new ways to suffer. Some say the cruelest methods came from royal courts, desperate to preserve their lean, graceful image. Others believe it was just village advice passed down in whispers, always with a judgmental glance. Daily life was a mean field of reminders that your body didn't belong. Even walking became a performance. Every step measured, every bounce noticed. Don't break the bridge. A boy yells as you cross a plank over a muddy stream. You're expected to laugh it off, but it still stings. You learn to walk quietly, to move carefully, to never sit first on a creaky bench. The anxiety becomes background noise humming beneath every moment, every breath. And here's a cruel irony. When famine finally arrives, and it will, you might outlast your neighbors. Your extra stores built up over anxious winters could carry you through the worst. But does anyone thank you for it? Number instead. They'll whisper that you hoarded food, that you must have taken more than your share, that your survival is further proof of your greed. It's the ultimate no-win situation. Now let's take a quick detour into the secret language of medieval portraits. If you're unlucky enough to have your likeness painted, the artist will do everything possible to fix you. Soften your jawline, slim your figure, narrow your hands. Being immortalized as you are is considered almost offensive. Art is supposed to inspire, not accurately record. No matter your station, the message is clear. Thin is in, and you're on the wrong side of history. But let's laugh at one more absurdity. The medieval equivalent of diet advice columns. There are treatises written by doctors, usually men who've never struggled with hunger a day in their lives, offering helpful tips like avoid pears, which increase fleshiness, or do not drink beer with supper. If only someone had invented kale smoothies. There's even a widely circulated belief that sleeping on your back will cause your stomach to rise. So best to sleep upright and hope gravity does its work. One Parisian physician once advised walking briskly after every meal, just not briskly enough to spill your wine. Sensible advice, perhaps, if your idea of exercise comes with a side of Cabernet. But in truth, most medieval folks weren't interested in compassion. If you tripped, you were top-heavy. If you yawned, clearly you were hungry again. If your seams pulled tight, someone might kindly offer to let them out with a smirk. These jokes are old, they're mean, they're relentless, but they're also a kind of code, a signal that people are watching, that they've noticed, that maybe you should be trying harder to disappear. And truth be told, your inner voice isn't much kinder. You try to reassure yourself. Bodies change, winters drag, springs delay. You try to picture a future where people judge by heart, not by hips. But in the present, all you can do is blend. And even that has its limits. Some nights, you dream of running off, vanishing into some faraway town where nobody knows your name, where you're just another shadow in the crowd. But even then, you'd have to cross the mountains. And trust Mepec. Animals were never built with comfort in mind. You collapse into bed, planks groaning beneath you, and long for a world where meals aren't laced with shame, where laughter doesn't come at your expense, where a body can simply be. But morning breaks, and reality is as sharp as ever. Your mother urges you to pace yourself at breakfast. The neighbor's kid dares you to chase him through the mud. The church bell rings, and you remember, confession isn't just for sins anymore. In this world, your body does the confessing for you. So, with a sigh, you brace yourself. The cloak still clings, the stairs still burn, but you lift your chin and step into the day. Maybe tomorrow, the seams will stretch a little easier, or maybe, just maybe, the jokes will sting a little less. Above you, the sky stitches together gray clouds and bird-shaped silhouettes, and you're already dreading your next war with your wardrobe. Because medieval fashion As you're learning has a wicked sense of humor, especially if your body doesn't match the mold. There are no soft joggers here. No forgiving fabrics. Every stitch feels like it was designed by someone who hated the idea of comfort. Let's talk clothes, because fashion's grip on your waistline. It isn't just physical. It's psychological warfare. Your first enemy, the chemise, a linen underlayer that clings like second skin. If you're lucky, it fits loosely. If not, it's a cruel, daily reminder of every stolen pastry. There's no elastic, no stretch, just seams that fight back. Next comes the kirtle or tunic, cinched tight with a belt meant to shape your figure, which, in your case, means broadcast it. If you're wealthy or dressing to impress, the absurdity ramps up. Men cram themselves into think itchy medieval leggings. Women wrestle with bodices so tight, they nearly faint before breakfast. And all of this? Just normal. Here's a grim historical fact. Tailoring was rough. Clothes were made to shared measurements, passed between siblings or whole households. A tailor's job wasn't to flatter. It was to make it fit somehow. Grew too much? The seams might be let out once, twice, if you were lucky. Need something bigger? They'd hand you a rope for a belt. Thrift was noble, but it was also cruel. And never more so than during feast days when everyone was expected to look their absolute best. And for the well-fed, that meant wrestling yourself into optimist-designed gowns and doublets. Women laced up so tightly, breath became a luxury. Men sucked in their guts for the ever-awkward codpiece eyes. That one. Historians still debate whether the puffy styles were a blessing hiding lumps under layers or just another cruel joke. Because sometimes they made things worse, drawing even more eyes to the bodies inside. Asterisk, now for a quirky tidbit. The most elite fashion obsessed lords sometimes took things even further. There are stories of men and women commissioning elaborate slimming illusions in their clothing. Vertical stripes, exaggerated shoulders, strategic embroidery. One especially vain duke was rumored to have his portrait painted in a doublet lace, so tight he could barely sit. Also, he'd look trim for posterity. The painter, no doubt, had a quiet laugh as he watched his subject try not to pass out. If you're working gas, things are both better and worse. You have fewer clothes, maybe 2 tunics, one for work and one for best. And there's no hope of hiding your shape. Your fat is just as visible when you're bent over in the fields as when you're kneeling in church. Jokes about splitting your seams aren't just for court gestures. Even your friends get in on it, ripping you as you patch yet another pair of hose. Historians still argue whether these humiliations were just jokes or a way of enforcing social order. Some point to some 2 laws, those strict rules about who could wear what based on rank and occupation. These laws were supposed to keep the classes separate, but in practice, they also singled out anyone who didn't fit. If your body required more fabric, you might even have to pay extra. Imagine that, being taxed for being yourself. Talk about adding insult to injury. But let's get to the most dreaded part of medieval dressing, public scrutiny. There's no hiding in baggy hoodies or oversized tees. If your laces strain or your hose split, everyone sees. There's no private mirror time. Your floors are paraded out for neighbors, friends, and the occasional rude stranger. Sometimes a seamstress will shake her head, sighing, "I'll need more cloth next time." Her meaning is clear, and everyone within earshot hears it too. You might even find yourself the subject of street entertainment. Mummers and minstrels, always on the lookout for fresh material. Love a fat joke. Picture this. You're at a village festival trying to enjoy the maple when the performers start a skit about a portly merchant whose clothes pop open during a dance. The crowd roars, and for the rest of the week, children call you by his name. It's meant to be funny, but it stings, especially when it's your tunic that threatens to split next. A modern aside here. Imagine telling a medieval person about yoga pants. They stretch, They'd gasp eyes wide. You can sit down and still breathe. The concept would blow their woolen socks off. By the end of the day, your body aches, not from hard labor, but from the constant squeeze, pinch, and pull of your clothing. Your mind aches too, from dodging barbs and sidelong glances. Some nights you loosen your belt just a bit and imagine what it would be like to wear whatever you want, whenever you want. But for now, you pull your cloak tighter, hoping to hide in plain sight. It never works. The cruelty of medieval fashion isn't just about discomfort. It's about power. Clothes are status. And when you don't fit, you're reminded every day that you're less than. The world says, "We see you." And not in the warm, fuzzy way. More like we see you and we judge you. Sometimes you'd give anything for just a little invisibility. If you're feeling brave or desperate, you might try to sew your own tunic a bit looser, but materials are expensive. Linen and wool don't come cheap, and you need every scrap for winter. There are stories of people patching together old bits, creating what we'd call a Franken garment. Fashionable? Not a chance, but at least it fits, even if it makes you look like a scarecrow with a pie addiction. You develop little tricks, standing at the edge of crowds so no one can comment on your profile, keeping your cloak draped just so, hiding the most offensive bulges, walking slowly so your tunic doesn't ride up. It's a performance, and you are both the actor and the audience, always watching for the next wardrobe malfunction. But the harshest moment comes during church. Everyone's expected to wear their best. And for the well-fed, that means wrestling yourself into doublets or gowns that were clearly designed by optimists. If the priest is feeling especially preachy, he might even point out midsmen the sin of excess. You sit there sweating, wishing you could disappear. The pew is narrow, the bench hard, and you feel every splinter pressing into your side. Even love isn't immune to the tyranny of fashion. If you're looking for a sweetheart, your chances drop every time you're seen strain. Lovers are supposed to be slender, pleasingly formed, easy to twirl on the dance floor. You try once to join in a festival reel, but your hose split mid-spin and everyone laughs. The memory burns for years, and still you wake up every morning and do it all over again. You struggle into your clothes, brace yourself for comments, and try not to let the shame swallow you whole. Sometimes you even find a moment to smile. Maybe when the chickens escape and everyone forgets about you for a second. Or when the neighbor's cat gets stuck in a tree and you're the only one tall enough to rescue it. Let's not forget, even the nobility weren't immune to fashion's cruelty. If you were a queen or a duke, the expectation was even higher. Portraits were supposed to flatter, not reveal. So artists painted you thinner than you really were. There are records of noble women refusing to appear in public until their gown fits just right. One famous countess reportedly fasted for a week before a royal ball, only to faint halfway through her entrance. The lesson: appearances mattered, sometimes more than reality. But historians still argue whether any of this mattered to the people. Who wrote the rules? Did they really care about health, or was it all about control? Was the ideal body type a reflection of actual taste, or just another way to separate us from them? Some say the obsession with thinness was tied to the rising influence of the church, which equated physical restraint with spiritual purity. Others blame the courts, where fashion set the tone for everyone else. No matter the reason, the result was always the same. Your body was up for discussion, and you rarely got the last word. Some nights, as you lie awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters, you wonder what it would feel like to be admired for something, anything other than your size. And still, there are moments of small rebellion. Maybe you add an extra pleat to your tunic just because you like the way it sways when you walk. Maybe you sneak a sweet roll and eat it in the orchard where no one can see you. Maybe you patch your hose in bright blue thread, turning your floor into something almost bold. These tiny acts of defiance help you survive even when the world seems intent on squeezing you into a mold that never fit. At the end of the day, you peel off your layers and stretch, letting your body breathe. The fire crackles, the room grows warm, and for a few minutes, you can pretend the outside world doesn't exist. The pressure of laces, belts, and judgment melts away, replaced by a gentler silence. Tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again. But for now, you close your eyes and dream of a future where clothes fit the person, not the other way around. Where fashion is a celebration, not a punishment. And where finally you can walk through the market with your head held high, without a care for seams or stares. You're up before dawn as always when the rooster crows like it's got something to prove. Today promises the same daily ordeal. One you can never quite escape. Eating in public. Because in the Middle Ages, food isn't just food. Every bite is watched, measured, judged. Dining becomes a theater of manners and morality. And when you're heavier than the norm, every mouthful feels like evidence against you in a trial that never ends. You take your seat at the long communal table, wood worn smooth by generations of elbows. The first rays of sunlight slant through the shutters, casting stripes across the faces of your family and neighbors. Everyone eats together, workers, masters, servants. Nobody escapes the group meal, and here you're on stage. The crust of bread in your hand, the way you butter it, even how quickly you chew, all open to public scrutiny. The thinner folks next to you tear tiny pieces and nibble as if the food might run away. You, on the other hand, are hyper-aware of every motion, afraid to appear too eager, too hungry. Someone coughs and glances your way. You pause, pretending to listen to the old man's story about last year's drought. A little voice in your head jokes. If they gave out prizes for the slowest chewer, you'd win by a landslide. Too bad that wouldn't help your reputation. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In most villages, there wasn't much to eat. Gruel black. Bread, maybe some turnips or cheese if you were lucky. Feasts were rare, reserved for holidays or weddings. But the expectation remained, moderation at all times. The church preached against gluttony from every pulpit. Overindulgence, even on something as plain as porridge, was seen as a slippery slope to other sins. That sermon you heard on Sunday, the one about feeding both body and soul. You know, the subtext was really, watch how much you take. If you're wealthy, the situation gets weirder. On one hand, people expect you to be a little plumper. After all, a round face signals that you're above the struggle of daily hunger. On the other, everyone loves a scandal. If a nobleman is seen reaching for seconds, the gossip mill churns. He's getting soft, must be lazy, too much roast goose, and not enough holy fasting. The line between abundance and excess is thin as a wafer, and if you trip, you're fair game. There's an extra layer of discomfort when guests are present. The rules multiply. You're supposed to take the appropriate amount, never the biggest slice of meat, never the last hunk of cheese. If you finish before others, you're greedy. If you eat too slowly, you're holding everyone up. A servant walks around with a picture of ale, refilling mugs, and you hesitate to accept more, knowing someone will notice. Historians still argue whether these rituals were designed to encourage sharing or simply shame those who didn't fit in. Some say it was all about scarcity learning to value every crumb. Others say shared meals were power plays, where restraint proved your status more than indulgence ever could. Either way, you're always second-guessing yourself. Always wondering how you're being read. Did you eat too much? Did you eat too fast? Here's a quirky tidbit. The legendary feasts in Castle Hall's swan pies. Rivers of wine, they weren't for people like you. For most, banquets were rare. And far more awkward than opulent Doc Picture chewing a tough cut of beef while a minstrel makes up a song about your appetite. Or the fool jeering, save some for winter. As you reach for seconds, even when food is scarce, the shame is plentiful. Sometimes it runs out before it even reaches your end of the table. By the time the bowl gets to you, Only broth remains. Someone laughs. Not your day, huh? It's meant as a joke, but the sting is real. Scrutiny is constant. Even at home. Your mother whispers, Lent is coming. You'll need to fast. You'll need to perform restraint. Sneak a little cheese after dark and guilt haunts you like a ghost. By morning, it feels like the whole village knows. So you learn to shrink yourself. To cut your bread smaller. Leave more broth than meat. And always calculate. Will this extra bite become tomorrow's rumor? You laugh at the teasing. At first. But inside, you chip away, piece by piece, wishing you could disappear, even as your hunger stays. And yet sometimes, food is still a quiet joy. A crust of bread in the still kitchen, the tang of cheese, the sweetness of a stolen apple. For a brief moment, it's just you and the warmth of flavor, untouched by judgment. Food is love. 2. A grandmother pressing an extra dumpling into your hand. A friend saving you the last fig. A lover offering the crispiest piece of duck skin. Like a small act of grace. But the next day, the old shame returns. You're back to reading faces, counting bites. At the village fair, they cheer for the one who eats the moss, but the praise turns sideways. Look how much he can hold. Smiles sharpen into smirks. No wonder he's so big. A compliment and insult in the same breath. Historians still debate whether medieval jokes about eating were cruel or just a form of bonding. Some say laughter was a release, a way to handle scarcity. Others believe it policed the boundaries of belonging. If you couldn't laugh at yourself, you didn't fit in. The pressure doesn't let up with age. As you grow older, you're expected to eat even less, as if wisdom comes with restraint. Young people are forgiven for robust appetites, but a plump elder is a target for whispers about decline. At the same time, if you get too thin, they'll say you're ill, you can't win. Here's a final quirky note. Some medieval diet guides insisted that eating with the wrong hand or at the wrong pace caused both indigestion and moral decay. There are instructions to chew exactly 12 times per mouthful, to swallow quietly, to never reach across the table. You memorize these rules, even though you know you'll never fully master them. You finish your meal, stomach only half full, heart heavy. Outside, the village stirs, the smithy clangs. The baker calls, children chase geese through the street. You put on your cloak and step into the day, determined to move with confidence, even if it's all for show. As the morning unfolds, you catch your reflection in a puddle. Round face, broad. Shoulders barely hidden beneath wool. You remember the feast days and fasts, the jokes and judgments, the 1,000 little ways you've learned to be small. But you're still here. You still walk the streets, still do your work, still find moments of laughter and warmth. You remind yourself food is not the enemy. The whispers are not the truth. The table, for all its judgments, is also a place of connection, of history, of life. And you, with all your curves and corners, belong there too. The day moves on, the sun rising higher. You face what's next. The endless medieval gauntlet of scrutiny, struggle, and survival. But tonight at the table, you'll find a small joy. A bite of honeycomb, a friend's smile, a moment when nobody is looking, and you can just be yourself. You might imagine on a particularly rough morning that somewhere in the future people will be able to pop into a clinic and ask for advice on weight management, maybe even leave with a prescription or a meal plan. In medieval Europe, you wish for nothing more than to be left alone about your size, but instead you're subjected to a parade of so-called remedies. Most of them either useless or downright absurd. Let's start with the basics. The medieval medical establishment isn't really an establishment at all. You're as likely to be treated by a barber with a rusty knife as by a learned physician. And even the physicians argue constantly among themselves. Historians still debate whether medieval doctors were earnest healers or just creative guesses with impressive robes. What they agree on is this: if you're fat, you're fair game for experimentation. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine is based on the ancient Greek theory of humors. 4 fluids sloshing around inside your body. And if you're too heavy, you're probably suffering from an excessive phlegm or black bile. The solution? Bleed you, of course. Or maybe they'll try to sweat it out of you. There's a good chance that by the end of the year, you've lost more blood to leeches and blades than to actual injuries. It gets weirder. Some doctors recommend a steady diet of bitter herbs, wormwood, hound, or something even nastier, always boiled into a potion that tastes like regret. There's a widely circulated recipe for fat-melting water. Equal parts vinegar, onion juice, and a dash of honey drunk before sunrise. Does it work? Only in the sense that it makes you wish you'd never been born. But your neighbor swears by it. She claims her cousin's uncle's sister lost 3 stone just by drinking it every day and then died of unrelated causes. That part is always whispered. Your mother, ever helpful, collects household cures. Rubbing your belly with wild sage, drinking water left overnight in a lead cup. Lid was considered medicinal, which says a lot about medieval science. And of course, fasting, not just during Lent, but anytime you look a little too flourishing. Some women tie cloth soaked in vinegar around their waist before bed, hoping to draw out the evil humors. The result, soggy linens, irritated skin, and the unmistakable smell of disappointment. But the most infamous medieval weight remedy is simple starvation. Fasting is praised by both the church and the local doctor, sometimes for weeks at a time. If you can manage it, you'll be celebrated for your piety. If not, well, you clearly lack willpower. This constant cycling between indulgence and deprivation becomes its own kind of torture. And you wonder how anyone's supposed to find balance, when every solution is just another way to suffer. For the elite, medical advice takes on a performance quality. Wealthy men and women employ personal physicians whose main job is to invent ever-stranger regimens for their bored, anxious masters. A duchess drinks nothing but boiled lettuce water for 3 weeks. A count commissions a special treadmill dot. It's really just a barrel you roll in, like a hamstringly with sore legs and less dignity. Word spreads, and soon everyone in the manor is rolling for their health. Meanwhile, peasants rely on heirloom cures. Eat raw garlic for a week, skip pork entirely, or only drink from the left side of the well. Some say cold water shocks the fat away. Mostly, it just gives you permission to scream at dawn, when none of it works. You sigh ... and go back to your chores grateful, secretly, for the strength a full meal gives you. Here's a quirky one. In some towns, apothecaries sold slimming amulets, herb pouches worn under your shirt. If someone asks about the smell, you joke it's for your humors. Really. You just hope it keeps people from standing too close in church. Doctors remind you, gluttony is a sin. So you confess your appetite, your cravings, your body itself remedies with a prayer, sometimes with a blistered walk to the next village. The goal? Shrink both flesh and spirit. Was it healing or control? Historians still debate it. What's clear? The rules kept everyone in line. Thinness as obedience. Suffering as virtue. Of course, not all of it was cruel. Some of it was comedy. One year, a traveling quack arrives, claiming to sell fat melting dust from Constantinople. You save up, sprinkle it on your stew, and immediately sneeze it out. Turns out it's mustard, seed and sawdust. The village coughs for a week. The quack disappears, and for once, you're not the only fool. At the tavern, no one counts drinks. A round belly gets you a song or a slap on the back, not a sermon. You start to wonder if maybe the cure isn't in powders or penance but in company. Still, every festival brings more scrutiny. You look thinner. Someone shouts. You're supposed to smile, say thank you, like a well-trained plow horse. Some nights you dream of escape, a hermit's hut, roots and silence, anything but one more speech about humors. Even the songs tease the doctors. One old tale tells of a fat friar caught sneaking pies after a month of fasting. He's punished by writing his confession in rhyme, but the verses go viral. Now, children sing them at fairs. The abbot never tries that diet again. So you keep going. Bitter brew. Morning walks. Whispered prayer for strength. You try new remedies just in case. You confess. You hope. And mostly you endure. You see the irony. Half the village starves. The other half diets. You remember when having a little extra was lucky, when the first fruit of harvest was cause for jointed guilt. Now every bite is a calculation. Every cure a little punishment. Still, you survive. At the heart of it, medieval remedies are about hope. The hope that this time you'll find the right trick. The secret that lets you eat your fill and still walk through town with your head high. The hope that someday your body will stop being a problem to solve and start being just yours. Tonight you sit by the fire, knees aching, belly full, and you laugh with your family about the fat melting powder and the quack's mysterious disappearance. The world is hard, but sometimes laughter is the only medicine you really need. The fire burns low. The remedies fade into memory. And you close your eyes, promising yourself that tomorrow you'll try again. Maybe with less vinegar, maybe with more patience, maybe with a little more kindness for your own stubborn, hopeful heart. The next morning, you hear the familiar clatter of hooves and cartwheels on the cobblestones. A sound that means it's time to head out of the village. Maybe to market, maybe to visit relatives, or maybe to deliver something for the Lord. Whatever. The reason, you know what's coming. The inevitable struggle with medieval transportation. Because if being fat in the Middle Ages is a trial, riding a horse or squeezing into a wooden cart is the part where the world really starts laughing at your expense. Let's start with the noble steed. In paintings and tales, knights are always shown astride their proud charges. Tall, gleaming, strong enough to carry an armored warrior into battle. The reality, most horses in medieval Europe aren't much taller than a modern pony, built more for endurance than for show, and certainly not for carrying more than a few hundred, especially without complaint. As you approach the stables, the stable boy gives you a sideways glance. Hope old Daisy's had her oats, he jokes, patting the horse's neck. You laugh politely, but you can feel the eyes of half the village on you. Climbing into the saddle isn't graceful at the best of times. Had a few extra pounds, and suddenly you're the main attraction. If you have a servant or friend, they might try to help. But their salt is often just more embarrassment. A push here, a heave there, the occasional suggestion that maybe you'd be better off walking. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Horses were valuable and relatively scarce, reserved for those who needed the most. Lords, messengers, traveling merchants. The average peasant might never ride a horse at all. But if you did have access, your size was immediately apparent. There are records of overburdened horses and even sumptuary laws that restricted certain people from riding altogether. Sometimes out of concern for the animal, sometimes just for appearances. You manage to get settled, feeling the saddle creak beneath you. Daisy shifts, her ears flicking back, and someone mutters, "Careful she doesn't bolt." You roll your eyes, but inside the anxiety, you've heard the stories. The time the baker's uncle sat on a mule, and the poor beast simply lay down in protest, refusing to move until someone fetched half the village to coax her up again. The story is still told at every feast with extra flourishes for comic effect. Now whenever you approach a horse, people start taking bets on whether the tale will be repeated. Historians still argue whether these jokes were truly mean-spirited, or simply a way to deal with the scarcity and fragility of medieval livestock. Some suggest they were a subtle form of policing, reminding everyone of their proper place and abilities. Others think it was just human nature, finding laughter where life was otherwise so hard. Travel by cart isn't much better. Wooden carts are built with narrow seats and hard planks, all angles and splinters. If you're lucky, there's a little straw thrown in for comfort. If not, well, you grit your teeth and try to balance as the cart. Bumps and jolts over every rut in the road. The driver, often your neighbor or hired hand, will sometimes sigh theatrically when you climb aboard, complaining about the extra weight, slowing the horse, or risking a broken axle. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some places, people believe that a cart or carriage blessed by a particularly heavy rider would never break again. Since it had survived the worst, there's even a folk saying, if it holds you, it'll hold anyone. Which is funny until you're the you they're talking about. You try to make yourself smaller, folding your arms, tucking your knees, but it doesn't really work. If you're traveling with others, you're expected to sit at the back or maybe walk alongside. If the road is rough, no one ever says it outright, but everyone knows. Give the old mayor a break, someone chuckles, and you pretend not to hear. Journeys are slow, uncomfortable, and never private. Every bump in the road jolts you against the wooden rails. And by the time you reach your destination, your hips are bruised and your patience is gone. Yet you do it because you must. There are things to buy and sell, messages to deliver, and life goes on. No matter how many jokes or splinters you collect along the way. Now, if you happen to be of noble birth, things take a slightly different turn. Wealthier families sometimes commission special saddles or padded seats, making the ride more comfortable, but also more obvious. The elaborate leather work, extra padding, and wider girth straps are all silent announcements of your problem, and the servants gossip about who needs what and why. Portraits from the period show lords and ladies perched delicately, but the reality is often more awkward, a constant negotiation between pride and pain. Some historians argue that for the very rich, being plump could even be a status symbol, a sign that you didn't have to work the fields or walk long distances. But those same historians point out that the jokes and jibes still flew, maybe even more so, because the wealthy were easy targets for satire. Poets and minstrels loved a story about a fat lord whose horse groaned beneath him, or whose coach wheels gave out halfway to the next manor. You learn quickly to pack light. The fewer bags and parcels, the better your odds of a less uncomfortable ride, but the road itself is unforgiving. Miles of mud, stones, and unpredictable weather. Shoes aren't made for comfort. And if you walk instead, the blisters come quickly. Sometimes you wonder how anyone, thin or heavy, makes it through a lifetime of these journeys. Here's another folk belief. If a traveler broke a horse or cart, it was a sign of bad luck, and the next person to use it should leave an offering. A coin, a scrap of cloth, even a bit of bread. You hear tales of people stuffing extra padding under the seat just in case, or carrying a charm to ward off accidents. Of course, when accidents do happen, it's always blamed on too much weight. Never bad roads or poor carpentry. Travel can also mean public humiliation. Arriving at a festival or church event, you step down from the cart, brushing off the inevitable comments. If the seat is broken, someone shakes their head and says, "Time to get a new carpenter," as if the wood wasn't already half rotted before you sat down. Sometimes children make up songs, little rhymes about riding the rails or cracking the cart. You force a smile, even join in once or twice, hoping to blunt the sting. But there are moments of real kindness too. The village healer might offer you an extra cushion. The cart driver might slow down for your sake. On the best days, you find a rhythm. The steady plod of hooves, the creak of the wheels, the soft chatter of birds in the hedgerows. You look out at the fields, the endless sweep of green, and remember that the journey is part of life, however difficult. Historians still debate whether these travel woes were as universal as they seem. Some point to accounts of robust, joyful travelers who shrugged off discomfort and made jokes of their own expense. Others insist that for those carrying extra weight, Every mile was a new opportunity for embarrassment and exclusion. The records are contradictory, full of exaggeration and myth. If you ever need to cross a river, well, brace yourself. Fairmen are notorious for complaining about heavy cargo. There are even stories of passengers being left behind because the boatman feared for his craft. Most oft-time it's just bluster, but it wears on you all the same. But here's a strange twist. In a handful of legends, the fat traveler becomes a hero. There's the tale of a portly merchant who sinks a leaking raft only to plug the hole with his own cloak and save everyone aboard. For a brief moment, your size is weakest as strength, resilience, even resourcefulness. Too bad these tales are few and far between. On the road home, the aches settle in. Your back, your hips, even your pride feels battered. But you also realize you've made it despite the jokes, the discomfort, the endless commentary. You climb down from the cart, stretch your limbs, and head inside, grateful for the sturdy ground beneath your feet. You might share a laugh with your traveling companions, swap stories about the worst journeys, and for a moment, the sting of the day fades. After all, everyone suffers on the road, just in different ways. Before you drift off to sleep that night, you remember something the healer once told you. All bodies break a little, one way or another. The trick is to keep going, so you do. One journey, one day, one sore, stubborn step at a time. The sun barely crests the rooftops when you find yourself facing another uniquely medieval ordeal. Finding and keeping a job. For most people, work in the Middle Ages isn't just about putting food on the table. It's identity, reputation, your ticket to a scrap of land or a spot by the communal fire. But if you're heavier than most, your opportunities narrow faster than a church door at midnight. Let's be blunt, medieval jobs are physical. The options are blacksmith, baker, field laborer, shepherd, weaver, apprentice to the tanner, or maybe with a little luck and literacy, a scribe or clerk. Each role has its own expectations, traditions, and all too often a certain body ideal. Being robust is sometimes seen as a plus for back-breaking farm work, but there's a difference between muscle and softness. The line is blurry, and for you, it often means endless explanation. Why you can't bend as easily, why you tire faster, why you need just a little more bread at midday. Mainstream historical fact. Most medieval villagers worked from before sunrise until well after dark 6 days a week. Calories were burned fast, food was scarce, and a lean, sinewy frame was considered normal. If you stood out, rounder face, thicker waist, softer hands, people noticed, and not always kindly. Some jobs like blacksmithing or masonry demanded a strong back and arms. You might think your extra bulk would help, but the reality is more complicated. Blacksmiths, for example, are expected to swing hammers all day, lift heavy iron, endure punishing heat. If you can't keep pace, the master will grumble. Apprentices whisper about too many pies, not enough push-ups. Sometimes the work suits you. Sometimes you feel every joke settle in your bones. Weaving and spinning, meanwhile, mean long hours hunched on a stool, feet working the pedals, hands guiding wool or flax. For women especially, dainty is praised. A fuller figure draws giggles. Mind you, don't snap the spindle. And if your knees knock the frame, you'll hear about it for weeks. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some guilds, especially the more prestigious ones like goldsmiths or scribes, there were informal weight tests, not official, but real enough. A new apprentice would be offered a tunic from the last boy. If it didn't fit, a raised eyebrow and a quiet word might follow. One guild in London supposedly required all members to fit the master's bench, a narrow wooden seat, without breaking it. Who knows if it's true, but the story survives. Historians still argue whether these customs were practical or just a way of policing social boundaries. Was it about protecting scarce resources, seats, clothes, tools? Or was it another excuse for gatekeeping, making sure only the right sort made it inside. If you try for less physical work, maybe as a scribe, clerk, or minor church official, you meet different hurdles. In theory, brains matter more than brawn. But even here, there's judgment. A sharp mind but a dull body. Someone says, if you're slower to rise, slower to kneel at prayer, slower to fetch the master's ink, your body becomes an easy scapegoat. People love a story about the lazy clerk, dozing over his parchment, ink-stained and chubby. Sometimes your size becomes your job. Town criers, for example, are picked for their loud voices and commanding presence. There's a certain pride in booming news from the steps of the church. But even then, jokes abound. We heard you coming before we saw you. If you're chosen as the inn's bouncer or the Lord's doorkeeper, your bulk is both your shield and your shackle. When the job's done, you're still the subject of whispers. He blocks the doorway as well as any bar. And then there's the invisible labor. Childcare, mending, brewing, market selling, all necessary, all unglamorous, and all subject to the same scrutiny. If you bake bread, customers watch your portions. If you tend sheep, shepherds tease that the flock is slimmer than the shepherd. In the market, every merchant hawks their wares with an eye on who buys the most, who eats the samples, who lingers at the sweet stall. Sometimes a generous customer presses a tartar sausage into your palm with a wink. For luck, friend. Other times you're told, leave some for the rest of us. Here's an odd reality. If you ever lose weight, you'll be the focus of a different kind of attention. Sickly, someone whispers, wasting away. In a society where famine is never far, sudden thinness is as suspicious as softness. There's no winning. Thevillagers' gaze always find something to pick at. The worst part is sometimes your body is used against you. If there's dispute over wages, over a botched job, over a lost item, someone might say, what do you expect? All he does is eat. Even if you work as hard as anyone, the myth of laziness clings. You feel it most at payday when coins are counted and stories traded. If you're heavier, people assume you've stolen the best morsels, hidden extra bread, or shirked chores. No one says it out loud, but the suspicion lingers like the scent of boiled cabbage. Still, there are jobs where size is an asset. Some festival roles, playing the jolly friar in pageantses, or the fearsome ogre in mama plays, are almost always given to the largest villager. The town needs its characters after all, and you fill the part well. There's some comfort in making. People laugh on your own terms, but it's a double-edged sword. Laughter in the Middle Ages is rarely kind. Occasionally, your body earns you unexpected respect. In a winter blizzard, when others are shivering and weak, your warmth helps you endure. Longer shifts at the mill. At harvest, you lift a sack of grain with a grin while others gasp. Built for plenty, someone mutters. And just for a moment, it's a compliment. You hang on to those moments. But for every good day, there are 3 bad. When the Lord's bafe calls for new hands, you line up with the others, hoping for work. Sometimes you're turned away with a shake of the head. We need someone nimble, or worse, you're chosen for the hardest task, the job no one else wants. He can handle it, the bafe says. He's got reserves. Your back aches before you even start. Historians still debate whether medieval society was truly meritocratic. The idea that anyone, no matter their shape, could rise on skill alone. The stories of saints and scholars suggest it was possible, but the everyday reality is less kind. If you don't fit, you fight harder for every chance, every crumb, every nod of approval. There's also the ever-present threat of injury. A fall, a twisted ankle, a sickness that lingers. Any of these can end a laborer's career. Recovery is harder when you're larger. The doctor's remedy is more severe. Sweat it out, they say, or eat less. As if that solves everything. Your family. Worries and the neighbors watch, waiting to see if you'll get back to normal. Still, you press on. Every day you show up at the forge, the fields, the kitchen. You find pride where you can. Maybe you teach a younger apprentice a better way to lift, sparing their back. Maybe you're the one with a joke or a story at the end of a long, cold shift. Maybe despite everything, you're the last to leave, closing the door behind you as dusk falls. And sometimes, when the stars are out and the world is quiet, you dream of a different job, a different place, a life where your body isn't the first thing people see. You imagine yourself in a scriptorium surrounded by books or on a distant road. As a wandering storyteller where words matter more than waistlines, but the Middle Ages have little patience for dreamers. Morning always comes. The chores never wait. Still you do what you must again and again. Because work is survival and survival is victory enough. As you drift off to sleep, the aches of the day settle in your bones. You promise yourself tomorrow. You'll do it all again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a way to laugh first. You wake to the clang of the church bell and the scent of rye bread baking in the next room. Another day, another round of social hurdles. This time around the food. That both tempts and torments you. Because in the Middle Ages, mealtimes aren't just about eating. They're stages for performance, pressure, and the unwritten rules that make every bite complicated. Feasts and fasting, two sides of the same coin, both rigged against anyone who doesn't fit the ideal. Feasts come rarely for most people, but when they do, weddings, saints' days, or the harvest festival, they're big, loud, and impossible to avoid. Everyone crowds into the great hall or the village square, tables groaning with pies, roast meats, bread, and ale. The Lord sits at the head, dishing out slices, and you do your best to take just enough. Enough to not seem greedy, but not so. Little that people ask if you're ill. Because in a world where everyone watches, the amount on your plate is another kind of reputation. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, feasts were structured with strict rules about who sat where, who got the best cuts, and how many courses you could expect. The trenches, slices of stale bread used as plates, often went to the poor after the meal. Everything was hierarchical, ceremonial, a microcosm of society itself. At these banquets, you quickly become self-conscious. If you laugh too loudly, someone says, it's because you've had too much wine. If you go back for seconds, a cousin jokes, saving for the winter. The musicians play on, the dancers swirl, but your mind is tallying every glance, every raised eyebrow. The pressure is enough to dull your appetite, though you force a smile and nibble when offered. Your hands shake a little, not from hunger, but from wanting to fit in. For the rich, feasts are more frequent, but the rules are even stricter. The dishes are richer, swan boar, pottage, thick with spices, and the scrutiny sharper. Women especially must eat with delicacy, never taking the last bite, never letting grease stain their fingers. If you're plumper than fashion allows, your choices are dissected by the sharp tongues of ladies in waiting. Sometimes a well-meaning friend leans over and whispers a diet tip. Crescent your wine, it cuts the humors. You nod politely and dream of escaping to the kitchen where the cooks laugh and lick their fingers with abandon. Historians still argue whether such rituals were meant to control or protect. Was the emphasis on moderation about fairness, or was it just another way to shame those who didn't fit the mold? Some say the rules helped stretch precious food. Others claim they reinforced the power of the hosts, their right to decide who was enough and who was too much. Between feasts, of course, comes fasting. Not just at Lent, though Lent is a seasonal-long ordeal, but dozens of other holy days too. Wednesdays, Fridays, eves of saints' days, the rules are clear. No meat, little fat, sometimes no food at all until sunset. The Church says fasting is a path to virtue, a way to discipline the body and humble the soul. You're told that a lean body means a clean conscience. When you're heavy, Even the little fasts feel like public confession. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some clever cooks invented fake foods for fasting. Meatless sausages made from fish, butter from mashed peas, almond milk to stand in for cow's milk. The wealthy get around the rules with expensive imports and creative loopholes. But for most, it's just hunger. You chew tough bread and wish for the next feast, knowing it will come with its own burden. Fasting isn't just about what you eat. It's about what others see. Your family watches closely. Is he really skipping breakfast? Did she sneak a bite when nobody looked? Neighbors gossip about who's failing at piety. If you lose weight, you're praised. If you don't, someone mutters about secret indulgences. Sometimes, you wonder if people would rather see you faint from hunger than look the same week after week. Historians still debate how seriously people took the fasts. Was everyone really so devout, or did most folks quietly bend the rules? Parish records hint at a thriving black market in eggs and sausage, but the sermons never let up. The message is clear. Virtue is measured by self-denial, and self-denial is always visible on your body. Feasts and fasts blend together a cycle of plenty and want. On feast days, you're expected to celebrate, but not too much. On fast days, you're supposed to suffer, but not visibly complain. Your body becomes a signpost for everyone else's anxieties, a reminder of scarcity, excess, luck, and failure all at once. A modern aside, imagine a world where every meal is broadcast to your entire social circle. Every plate, every portion, every morsel judged and remembered. That's medieval life. Except there's no turning off the comments, no logging out. Sometimes you find a moment of peace. A quiet meal by the river, a handful of berries snatched in the forest, a bowl of pottage, with just the right amount of salt. For a moment, you're not a spectacle or a sermon illustration. You're just hungry and then full. The simplicity of it makes you smile, even if it never lasts. On the worst days, the hunger from fasting mixes with the shame from feasting. You feel stuck between two impossible standards. Never enough, always too much. You look at your reflection in the well and wonder if you'll ever be allowed to just be. But the world keeps turning. Another Saint's Day arrives. Another wedding is celebrated. You play your part. Nod, smile, accept the scraps or the scolds. Sometimes you find small joys. A friend slipping you an extra roll. A child sharing their apple. The cook winking as she fills your bowl a little higher. You remember those moments. Savor them. Let them remind you that kindness can survive even in the most judgmental times. At night, as the candles burn low and the wind howls through the shutters, you let yourself hope that someday the cycle will break. That someday a full belly won't be a source of shame and a little softness won't make you an outcast. Until then, you navigate the labyrinth of feasts and fasts, doing your best to keep your head above the waves. You drift off to sleep, stomach growling or pleasantly full, dreaming of a table where everyone has enough and nobody has to perform for their place at it. Night falls and you're left with another problem that most of your neighbors never think about. Getting a good night's sleep. The Middle Ages aren't known for comfort. But for you, with a larger body, every bed is another battle. Every night a gamble between aches, whispers, and the groaning protests of crude furniture. The luxury of a bed that fits is for dreams, not reality. Let's start with the basics. The average medieval home, peasant or merchant, rarely features what we'd call a perturbed. For most, it's a wooden frame with rope or woven reeds stretched across, and topped with a mattress made of straw, feathers if you're lucky, or sometimes old rags. A thick wool blanket, perhaps of fur, is thrown over the top. The mattress sags. The frame cacks and the rushes on the floor aren't much help. Sharing is common. Parents, children, even a cousin or two. Privacy is a rumor, and space is at a premium. For someone with a broader frame, the first challenge is simple logistics. The beds are narrow, sometimes only 3 feet across. Rolling over means colliding with whoever shares your sleeping space, or more likely nearly toppling off the side. If you're taller or heavier than most, your feet dangle, your shoulders push against. The frame and the blanket never quite covers everything. Every movement is a negotiation. Every sigh a potential wake-up call for the whole family. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval times, sleep was often split into first sleep and second sleep. People would nod off after dusk, wake in the middle. Off night for prayers or chores, then doze again until sunrise. If you're large, that means 2 rounds of wrestling with your mattress, trying not to wake the sleepers crammed in beside you. It doesn't help that beds aren't built for weight. You lie down carefully, hoping the ropes don't snap or the frame doesn't crack. If it does, you're the punchline for weeks. There goes the bed again. Must have had an earthquake. Even when nothing breaks, the springs squeal and the posts groan, drawing giggles and rolled eyes from theaters. Repairs are expensive, so each night you lie extra still, like a guest in your own home. Historians still argue whether bed size and quality reflected a family's wealth or just their priorities. Some believe prosperous households spent extra on wider beds, feather mattresses, and plush pillows, while others insist that even the rich skimped, saving their money for clothes or feasts. Either way, few had the space or resources to tailor beds to individuals, especially not for the unusual body. It's not just the bed either. If you snore, and heavier folks often do, you're likely to be nudged awake, teased in the morning, or outright banished to the hearth if your family gets desperate. There are remedies, of course: sleeping upright, stuffing herbs under your pillow, or tying a rag around your jaw. None really work. Your snoring is the subject of many jokes. Sounds like the town mill, your uncle grumbles. If you toss and turn, you're blamed for the lumps in the mattress or the bruises on your sleeping partner's shins. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval doctors believed sleeping on your right side would prevent excess flesh from settling, as if your body were a sack. A flower that needed proper storage. One medical manual recommends propping yourself with 2 firm bolsters and a small wooden wedge. You try it once and wake up with sore neck and a bruised ego. That's the end of that experiment. The struggle doesn't end when the sun rises. If you're stiff and sore, there's little sympathy. You should get more exercise, someone says. Or maybe less bread with your supper. The mattress is blamed, but the blame lingers on your body. Sometimes you're expected to rise early and help remake the bed, lifting heavy bundles of straw or smoothing out the reeds, all while your muscles protest. The chores of sleep don't end with dreaming. They continue with every uncomfortable morning. Travel brings new misery. Inns and guest houses are worse than home. If you can afford a bed at all, it's likely smaller and rougher than what you're used to. The innkeeper sizes you up, points to a narrow cot, and mumbles, "Don't move too much." If you're lucky, the other travelers are thin and agreeable. If not, it's a night of elbows, knees, and whispered complaints. More than once, you're forced to sleep on the floor, wrapped in your cloak, grateful for the warmth of the kitchen hearth, but wishing for a real mattress. If you're wealthy, you might have a grand canopy bed. But size alone isn't comfort. Feather mattresses compress under your weight, pillows flatten, and even silk sheets can't stop the ache in your hips or shoulders. Servants gossip about the lords. Midnight fidgeting or the lady's bed frame that groans like the drawbridge. Sometimes you commission repairs or new furniture, but each delivery is another round of public attention. Needed a bed for 2. The carpenter's joke winking at your expense. Historians still debate how much these struggles shaped medieval attitudes toward body size. Was a soft body seen as a sign of comfort or as evidence of laziness? Did discomfort at night make people more irritable, more judgmental during the day? Some suggest that lack of sleep played a role in the era's legendary crankiness. Others claim the struggle simply became another way to reinforce the ideal. Thin is practical. Thin is pious. Thin sleeps through the night. What little privacy you have at bedtime becomes precious. Sometimes you sneak away to the hoft or the barn, hoping for solitude. The animals don't judge. They just snuffle and settle around you, grateful for the warmth. The straw is scratchy, but at least you can sprawl out, stretch, and breathe without worrying about breaking something or someone. For a few moments, you remember what rest is supposed to feel like. There are occasionally small acts of kindness. A mother tucks an extra blanket around your feet. A sibling swaps places to give you the edge of the bed. On cold nights, someone shares their pillow, their warmth, their patience. These moments make the rest of it bearable. Proof that love can survive even the narrowest mattress. But most nights, you lie awake, listening to the quiet snores and shifting bodies around you. You count the cracks in the ceiling, the distant barking of a dog, the wind rattling the shutters. Your joints ache, your back stiffens, and you wonder if you'll ever know the luxury of waking up refreshed. Sometimes you envy the thin ones who twist and curl without a care, who fit anywhere and never have to apologize for the space they take. You wish for just a night to sleep without self-consciousness, without pain, without waking to another joke. Yet dawn always comes, and you rise again, determined to find rest however you can. Maybe tonight you'll find a better spot, or the bed will hold, or your dreams will be sweet enough to make you forget the aches. You tie on your cloak, shake the straw from your hair, and step out into the chill of the morning. One more survivor of the medieval night. The world waits, unforgiving as ever. But you carry on, shoulders sore, spirits stubborn, still searching for comfort in a world that rarely offers it. By now, you've probably noticed that life in the Middle Ages is a long parade of tests of your patience, your pride, and often your heart. And if you're heavier than the village average, the next test can be especially cruel. Finding love or even just a little romance. Medieval beauty standards are a moving target. But one thing rarely changes. Thin is in, and softness, especially in a woman, is either the butt of a joke or the subject of a sermon. Let's set the scene. You're at a harvestance. Lanterns swinging, fiddles playing, everyone dressed in their best. The air smells of apples and hay. You watch couples pair off, hands clasped, faces flushed from cider and excitement. You're hopeful, even a little nervous. Will anyone choose you tonight? You try to catch the eye of someone you've admired for months, but they look past you. Laughing with friends. You smooth your tunic, wishing it fit just a bit looser, and practice your most charming smile. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval poetry and courtly love stories might swoon over pale skin, bright eyes, or delicate hands. But most of all, they idolize slender waists, willowy limbs, and faces like the new moon. If you're not blessed with these features, you're not the inspiration for treat or ballads. You're the one who listens, clapping politely while the favorites twirl across the floor. Of course, there are exceptions. Some regions and eras do value roundness, a sign for the elite of abundance and fertility. A wealthy merchant's wife might be praised for her rosy cheeks and full figure in a winter portrait. But down at street level, the standards are stricter. A serving girl with broad hips is more likely to get a wink from the cook than a secret love note. A miller with a big belly might be respected for his strength, but rarely for his looks. It gets worse when parents and relatives get involved. Marriages are rarely about love. There are alliances, trades, a way to climb the social ladder, or at least keep from falling off. If you're heavier, you become a good match for the right sort, often meaning someone older, poorer, or similarly afflicted. A hopeful young man with a round face and gentle eyes might be quietly redirected toward practical unions. A girl who doesn't fit the village ideal is told to be grateful for any offer. No one says it outright, but you can feel it. Your body is a bargaining chip, not a gift. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval matchmaking often involved neighbors and family friends. There were even professional go-betweens known as boards or marriage brokers who would sing your praises, sometimes a little too creatively. She's strong as an ox, never sick a day. Or he's got a belly but also a fortune. The flattery was as transparent as ale in a clean glass. The best brokers could spin a punch into a virtue. You'll never starve married to him. But everyone knew what was left unsaid. Historians still argue whether these attitudes were fixed or flexible. Did war, famine, or changing times ever soften the standards? Some say that in times of hunger, a bit of extra flesh was prized, a promise of children and survival. Others insist that the old jokes and judgments clung on no matter what, passing from generation to generation. But nothing stings like rejection. You overhear someone say, "She's sweet, but she squashed me in a hug." Or, "He's nice, but I want a man who can dance all night, not just eat all night." You try not to let it show, but every comment echoes later in the dark when you're alone. Even kind friends offer advice. Maybe skip the honey cakes for a month. Meant to help, but it hurts all the same. Weddings are the hardest. Watching the ceremonies, flowers, laughter, promises made. You can't help but wonder if you'll ever stand at the altar, eyes locked with someone who truly wants you, not just your dowry or your labor. The songs are about longing and love, but you notice the unspoken rules. The bride's dress is always small, the groom's belt always tight. At the feast afterward, the happiest couples are thin and young, passing each other sweet bites as if calories don't exist. You smile, you clap, you dance fast, but inside a small ache grows. Yet sometimes love sneaks in the back door. Maybe it's the baker's apprentice who winks as you buy your bread, or the shepherd girl who shares her lunch with you on a rainy day. These moments feel stolen, secret, precious, proof that kindness and attraction can survive even the harshest rules. And there are places and times when people look past size entirely. In a crowded tavern with mugs raised high and music filling the rafters, laughter matters more than waistlines. If you're generous, quick with a story or a joke, you can be the heart of the room, the one everyone wants at their table. Some couples bond over shared struggles. No one else understands how it feels. You whisper to each other, and in that you find comfort. There's also the quiet love that grows with time. Two people who start as friends, helping with chores, sharing secrets by the riverbank, exchanging glances across the pew at church. These loves don't make it into poems, but they last, weathering years and the gossip. The world may not cheer, but you learn to savor what you have. Still, the world is full of reminders that your other children laugh and point, mimicking the adults. Strangers call out, "Careful, don't crush me," or "Room for two on that bench." You become wary, bracing for the next joke, the next sidelong look. Sometimes you try to change. You eat less, walk more, pray for a miracle. For a while, it seems to work until the next festival, the next winter, the next stretch of bad luck. Your body is stubborn, holding on to every bit of softness like a secret. Eventually, you give up or you make peace with it. You learn to love yourself the way you wish others would. Historians still debate whether medieval folk ever truly saw inner beauty. Was kindness, humor, or generosity ever enough? Or did everyone, from the lord to the farmhand, bow to the idol of thinness? The truth is probably somewhere in between, a mix of longing and reality, hope and habit. As years pass, you notice something. Field couples, the ones who survived famine and war, rarely look like the ballads describe. They're broad-shouldered, soft around the middle, hands joined in quiet understanding. Maybe love changes the rules. Or maybe the world gets tired and stops caring. You wonder if one day people will remember the laughter and warmth, not the inches and pounds. In the end, you carve out a space for yourself, a small corner of the market, a circle of friends who see more than size. You dance, you sing, You fall in love in your own time, your own way. The world doesn't make it easy, but you find moments of joy, tiny victories that no one can take from you. On cold nights, you wrap yourself in a too small blanket and dream of a world where love isn't measured in inches or stones. You wake to another day, another round of tests, but something inside you is stronger. The ache of rejection becomes a song of survival, a reminder that you're still here, still hoping, still open to the possibility of happiness. Because even in the harshest times, love finds a way. Quiet, persistent, stubborn as spring grass. And sometimes when you least expect it, you look up from your work or your meal or your sorrow, and someone is looking back with kindness, with understanding, maybe even with longing. In that moment, all the jokes, all the shame, all the lonely nights fade away, and you remember you are worthy just as you are. The candles flicker lower as another day's work and awkwardness crawl to a close, and you steel yourself for what's become the worst kind of medieval entertainment, public shaming. If you're heavier than average in the Middle Ages, sooner or later, your body becomes the lesson, the warning, and more often than not, the joke for the whole town. It isn't just the stray insult here and there. It's woven into the very culture, the fabric of festivals, church rituals, and even justice. Public punishments aren't rare in your world. Stocks and pillories are as common as bread ovens. They're used for thieves, gossips, drunkards, and sometimes simply for people who break the unwritten rules. Sometimes that's you. You may never end up in the stocks for your size, but if you're fat, you always feel the threat hovering. Break a bench? Take too much at a feast? There's always someone ready with a smirk, careful, or they'll put you on display. It's not a joke. It's history. Public shame was a tool used often, used loudly, and it was meant to sting. A baker who shorted the bread might be marched through the streets with a fake loaf around his neck. A gossipy woman forced into a metal mask she couldn't speak through. Sometimes the crimes were real. Sometimes they were just a reminder. This is who has power, and this is who doesn't. For those with larger bodies, the shame came quieter but no less sharp. At village festivals, mock parades were staged. The king of fools? Usually the roundest man, dressed in rags, pelted with scraps while the crowd laughed. You laugh too, because what choice do you have? But the joke lingers long after the music ends. Even bread festivals became battlegrounds. Mock trials for greedy cooks, servants made to kneel in the mud. If you're on the heavier side, you know the odds sooner or later you'll be called up for fun. Some say these rituals helped communities bond. Others say it kept bodies in check, kept people in line. Even outside festivals, shame finds you. Trip, and the field kids chant. Sit down, and someone whispers, make room. If you're a child, you learn to disappear. If you're grown, the joke sharpen pause. A glance, a loaded, will you leave any for the rest of us? It's not always just words. Some villages had punishments. A pie-shaped hat, a tunic stuffed with straw, a garland of bread, rolls, a slow parade of humiliation for anyone who didn't play along. You're expected to laugh. Refusing to? That's dangerous. That's pride. So you learn to laugh first. Loudest. At yourself. Sometimes it helps. For a moment, it feels like safety. Like maybe you've earned your place in the cruel little play. But inside, the weight builds. Squid as snow, heavy as stone. And the church? They watched too. Sermons called out the gluttons by name. If your body looked like sin, you might be summoned for public penance, or worse, made to confess it before the entire congregation. Medieval priests knew how to wield humiliation like a weapon. Historians debate how much of this was about discipline and how much about entertainment. Some records describe audiences who wept with laughter at the expense of the village glutton. Others note moments when the crowd turned ugly, hurling not just words, but stones. Even the most pious societies needed scapegoats, and a plump neighbor was an easy target. There are rare moments when the laughter turns, when someone steps forward to help, to offer a hand or a gentle word. Maybe it's a friend or a relative or even a stranger. Maybe someone else is singled out for once, a new arrival, or someone who's fallen from grace. And you find yourself wishing you could stop the ritual for good. You imagine a world where humor is kind and bodies aren't weapons, a quirky medieval remedy for shame. Some people carried little talismans or charms meant to protect against the evil eye, bad luck, gossip, or mockery. You tuck one in your pocket, a smooth stone, or a twist of red thread. It doesn't stop the laughter, but it gives you something to hold on to when the world feels cruel. Night falls and you remember the day's humiliations. You relive the festival parade, the jokes in the tavern, the whispered laughter in the pew. Sometimes you cry quietly where no one can see. Sometimes you resolve to be stronger, to fight back with wit and humor, but always you feel the ache, the slow bruising of being the lesson instead of the hero. Historians still debate whether people ever rebelled against this cycle of shame. There are stories of fat friars who turned their mockery into power, leading their own bands of jesters or using humor to shield others. Some say the best storytellers and minstrels were those who knew how to turn pain into laughter, who could make even the Lord's cruelest joke seem like nothing at all. Still, it's a lonely kind of armor. At night, when the laughter fades and the village sleeps, you're left with the memories of the stocks, the dunce cap, the too tight tunic, the feeling of eyes always watching, always weighing. You dream of a world where no one is made a lesson for others, where kindness is the rule instead of the exception. You wake and do it all again because that's what survival means. You learn to laugh first, to offer the joke before someone else can. You find your small tribe, the friends who understand, the ones who listen instead of laugh. You hold on to your charm, your courage, and the hope that someday things might change. If nothing else, you survive. And in the harsh world of the Middle Ages, sometimes that's the bravest act of all. Morning light creeps in through cracks in the shutters, painting golden lines across the uneven floor. You've survived another night and another round of the Ville's jokes, but today brings a challenge both literal and ironclad. The armor that stands between you and battle, or between you and the parade ground, or if you're unlucky, between you and yet another round of ridicule. Because if there's one medieval invention designed to make life extra hard for anyone carrying a few extra pounds, it's this suit of armor. For most, armor is a distant symbol, something for knights and lords, those rare few with the money and status to warrant protection on horseback. But every village has its militia, every town its guards, and every able-bodied man and sometimes woman may be called upon to defend hearth and home. The town's blacksmiths keep battered helmets and mismatched breastplates hanging on pegs in the church porch. You hope every year that your name is left off the muster roll, but as always, luck isn't on your side. On drill days, you trudge to the green, where the captain sizes up the villagers with a calculating eye. You know what's coming. Hope we've got the big breastplate today. And sure enough, someone chuckles as they pull out the largest pieces of battered iron. You wait your turn, feeling the eyes, hearing the whispers. The captain hands you a cuirass meant for a man half your width. Go on, squeeze in, he grins. You do your best, sucking in your stomach, twisting and turning. It pinches, the straps barely reach, and you wonder if you'll pop a rivet. Mainstream. Historical fact. Medieval armor, especially for commoners, was rarely custom fit. Suits were handed down, pieced together from whatever could be found. For the truly wealthy, armorers could build a harness to your exact measurements, but for most, it was make do and mend. If you didn't fit, you just had to make it work. Or more often you had to fight without it, exposed and vulnerable. If you manage to wedge yourself into the cuirasses, the real problems begin. Armor is heavy, hot, and unforgiving. It chafes at every joint, pinches the flesh, rubs your skin raw. If you're larger, the gaps under your arms and around your neck are tighter. The greaves dig into your calves, and the helmet sits askew. You march clanking and swaying, the metal ringing with every step. The village boys snicker, the captain shakes his head, and you do your best to pretend you don't mind. Historians still argue whether armorers truly cared about the comfort of their clients. Some say the best masters would go out of their way to fit even the largest of lords. Others insist that unless you were royalty, you got what you got. For the majority, one size fits none was the uncomfortable truth. Drill days are bad enough, but battle is worse. If you're unlucky enough to be pressed into real service, a feud between neighbors, a raid by bandits, you strap on whatever armor you can and pray it holds together. In the cows of the field, it's every man for himself. You struggle to lift. Your arms, your breath is short, and your muscles burn. Sometimes your own equipment is more dangerous than any enemy. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some battles, men so desperate to escape their own ill-fitting armor would toss pieces away as they ran, leaving a trail of breastplates and gauntlets behind them. Chroniclers described fields gleaming with abandoned mail, proof that comfort and the ability to run often outweighed pride. Of course, if you're wealthy and can afford bespoke armor, things are a little easier. Master armorers in Milan, Nuremberg, or Greenwich could craft a suit for any shape if you had enough gold. But such work took months, sometimes years, and was more art than industry. The result might be magnificent, but it came with its own challenges. The gossip, the friendly teasing from peers, the endless reminders of just how much you'd paid to cover your excess. Parades and tournaments, meanwhile, were another kind of gauntlet. The whole town turned out to watch men show off their armor, riding horses decked in banners and plumes. If you're larger, every eye is on you as you ride past. Do the straps hold? Does the saddle creak? Does the armor gleam or groan? If anything slips, 1,000 voices are ready with a quip. The lighter, more agile men leap from their mounts, dance in the lists, swing their swords with grace. You struggle just to stand upright, your helmet fogging with every breath. If you lose, it's blamed on your bulk. Too slow, too soft, too stuffed with goose. If you win, it's a joke too. Must have sat on his opponent. No victory is free of laughter. There's also a practical downside. Armor traps heat, and heavy bodies run hotter. After an hour in the sun, your linen undershirt is soaked. Sweat pulls in the joints, and blisters bloom under every strap. The stench when you finally pry yourself free is a punishment all its own. You hear whispers at the bathhouse, sniffs and smirks. Air it out, man. Someone shouts as if you haven't already tried. Sometimes you're given the easy job. Guarding, gate, standing watch on the town wall, or carrying a banner in the parade. It's less dangerous, but it comes with its own cost. Hours on your feet, armor biting at your shoulders, the weight of judgment heavier than any mail. You'd rather swing a sword than stand still for the crowd's amusement. Historians debate whether armor was meant as much for show as for defense. Some point to the elaborate engravings, the gilded helmets, the suits so ornate they could never be worn in real combat. Others insist that for most people armor was a last-stitch hope, something borrowed and patched, never quite fitting, always threatening to betray its wearer at the worst possible moment. Here's another quirky fact. In some medieval courts, jesters and fools were given bits of armor, helmets too large, breastplates too small as comic props. They'd stagger and wobble, making a mockery of the knightly ideal. It was all in fun, supposedly. But if you're the one who fits the punchline, the laughter isn't so easy to take. Even in death, the jokes don't end. There are tomb mages, stone knights carved in full armor, who look much slimmer than the bodies that filled the tombs. Artists trimmed away the bellies, narrowed the faces, made every lord a legend of chiseled cheekbones. The body, in the end, was erased. Only the ideal survived. You do your best to survive too. You learn tricks. Padding the straps with wool, loosening a buckle when no one's looking, rubbing lard on your neck to keep the metal from burning. You help your friends into their armor, laugh at their complaints, and sometimes, just sometimes, you manage to laugh at your own, but you never forget the risk. In a world where violence is never far, armor can be a blessing or a curse. If it fits, it saves your life. If it doesn't, it might be the end of you. The day ends with the clang of the bell and the clatter of mail as you peel away the layers and sink onto a bench exhausted. Your muscles ache, your skin burns, and your pride feels battered. You look around at the others, thin, thick, short, tall, and wonder if anyone really fits the armor the world gives them. You lie awake that night, every bruise a reminder, every ache a lesson. In your dreams, you fight battles with no armor at all, running free across green fields. No iron, no shame, just you and the wind. In the morning, you wake and face the day again, because that's what you do. The armor waits, heavy and silent in the corner. The jokes and judgment wait too. But so does the sunrise. And maybe, just maybe, another chance to prove that you're more than the suit you wear. You wake with the echoes of armor's weight still clinging to your skin. But today brings a new ordeal, a journey. Medieval travel is a gamble, even at the best of times. But when your body doesn't fit the seats or the social expectations, every mile becomes a test. Whether you're bound for a distant fair, a family visit, or summoned by the Lord for taxes or labor, you face the same obstacles again and again. Rough roads, rude stairs, and a world never built for comfort. Let's start at the beginning, preparing. For our travel. The average medieval journey is an exercise in logistics. You pack what little you have, a bundle of clothes, a hunk of cheese, a coin or two if fortune's been kind. Most people walk, and the prospect fills you with dread. The roads are mud in the rain, dust in the sun, rutted with cart tracks and strewn with rocks. Thin-soled shoes don't though. And if you're heavier, every stone, every mile grinds at your feet and knees. Mainstream historical fact, even short trips, just 10 or 20 meters, can take all day or longer. For the poor, there's no such thing as travel. Light. Every extra pound on your body feels doubled by the time you've trudged to the next village. Travelers band together for safety, but you're always at the back moving slower. Breath coming heavy, sweat darkening your tunic. And if you're lucky enough to afford a seat in a cart or carriage, well, it's only a little better. Carts are built for goods, not comfort. The seats are narrow planks, unpadded and unforgiving. Every jolt rattles your teeth. Every bump throws you against the hard sides. If you're not the smallest, you're expected to make yourself smaller. Squeeze in, pull your knees close. Don't take up too much space. The driver sighs as you climb aboard. Hope the wheels hold, he says, only half joking. You force a laugh and pray that nothing breaks. Historians still argue whether medieval carts were truly so flimsy, or if the stories are just tall tales, but everyone agrees. Travel is hard on the body. And when you're bigger, it's harder still. You feel the judgment. In every glance, every muttered comment. Heavy load today, someone whispers. That's why we're slow. At inns or way stations, the beds are even smaller and the rooms crowded. Sometimes you're left to sleep in the common room by the fire. Your size making you an easy excuse for full lodgings. No room? Try the stable. The innkeeper shrugs, and you trudge out to bed, down with the animals, grateful at least for warmth and the absence of prying eyes. If you do find a space, you curl up tight, careful not to disturb anyone. The jokes about snoring, about beds breaking, about needing 2 pillows never really stop. The journey is marked by discomfort, but also by endless waiting. Ferrymen at river crossings look you up and down, sometimes making you wait for a lighter. Boat, sometimes charging an extra coin for balance. Bridges are narrow, their rails worn smooth by centuries of travelers. If your cloak snags or your foot slips, you feel a dozen eyes on you, wondering aloud if you'll topple the lot into the river. Children point. Adults shake their heads, and you keep moving, determined not to let them see the sting. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some towns, travelers who broke a bench or jostled a wagon loose were required to leave a coin as an apology to the wood. Some believe this would ward off bad luck on the road ahead. You make the payment more than once in your life, sometimes out of superstition, some to mess just to shut people up. Every rest stop is a relief and a risk. If there's a market, you wander the stalls, eyeing the fresh bread and fruit, aware of the looks when you linger too long. In taverns, space is precious. You wedge yourself into the corner and pray the chair holds, ordering the cheapest meal and letting the jokes wash over you. Sometimes, though, there's kindness. A farmer's wife presses an apple into your hand. A child asks you to tell a story while the adults gossip. You savor those mints, tucking them away to warm you when the road grows lonelier. The worst part is the knowledge that every village, every town is its own small stage. News travels fast. By the time you arrive at your destination, people already know about the large stranger on the road. If you're visiting relatives, the conversation starts with concern. Are you eating well? But quickly shifts to advice. You know, walking is good for the heart. Less ale, more soup. You nod, you smile, you tell yourself it's just a bit, not cruelty. If your journey is for business, you face a different kind of judgment. At the market, haggling over prices, the merchant sizes you up, perhaps offers smaller portions for your own good. If you're buying cloth, the weaver frowns at your measurements, wondering aloud if she have enough yardage. Every transaction becomes a tiny negotiation of worth. Are you less deserving, less valuable simply because you're larger? Historians still debate whether these biases were universal or just local quirks. Some records suggest that in prosperous times, a big belly was a sign of luck, a walking storehouse against famine. Others note that as towns grew and standards shifted, the pressure to conform, to shrink, to disappear only increased. The road itself never judges. Fields stretch away, golden green, wildflowers nodding in the breeze. Birds wheel overhead. For a few moments, away from towns and eyes, you remember what it's like to just be, to walk at your own pace, to feel the earth solid beneath your feet. You pause by a stream, washing away the sweat and dust. And for a little while, you're only another traveler beneath the wide sky. Still, the journey is hard. Your feet blister. Your joints ache. You learn tricks. Stuffing grass in your shoes. For extra padding, tying your belt looser. Drinking deep from wells and springs. You trade stories with other wanderers, laughing at the strangeness of the road. Some understand, some don't. But all are glad for company, for a voice in the darkness. There's danger too. Bandits, wild animals, the threat of getting lost. You move slower, making you an easier target, so you stay with groups when you can. Sometimes your size is an advantage. People assume you're strong, hard to rob. Sometimes it's just another thing to overcome. Arriving home, wherever that is always bittersweet. You're glad for a familiar bed, a friendly face, but the old jokes and old patterns return as if you never left. Still, you carry something new from every journey. A story, a scrap of wisdom, a reminder that the world is bigger and wilder than your village's narrow gaze. Here's another quirky fact. Some pilgrims, especially those traveling to holy sites, wore their hardships like badges of honor. The heavier ones were sometimes praised for bearing the weight of sin, trudging on despite the pain. For a moment, faith and fortitude outweigh the jeers. But once the pilgrimage is done, so is the tolerance. You keep walking, keep traveling, keep surviving. Maybe someday the road will lead you to a place where comfort is more common, where size is less important, where the only measure is the length of your stride and the courage in your heart. Until then, every journey is a quiet act of rebellion, a reminder that you belong wherever you set your feet, no matter what the world says. At night, as you lie in some strange bed, the aches of the day settle in. You stretch, you sigh, you let the day's discomfort drift away with the wind outside. Tomorrow you'll rise again. One more traveler, one more story in a world that rarely makes room for the likes of you. Morning comes with the tolling of church bells and the taste of dust from yesterday's journey still on your tongue. You stretch sore limbs and take a deep breath, knowing that whatever aches you've earned, today brings a different sort of challenge. One that seeps from the pulpit and echoes through every narrow lane. For in the Middle Ages, the church isn't just the center of spiritual life. It's the loudest, most persistent voice in the relentless chorus of judgment about your body. And when you're fat, the message is clear. Your flesh is evidence of your flaws. Let's set the scene. Sunday. Sunlight streaming through colored glass. The whole village crammed into the chilly nave. You shuffle in, hoping to melt into the crowd, but you're always visible, bigger than the neighbor on either side. Knees pressed against the pure head, cloak straining around your shoulders. The priest stands tall at the altar, gold and crimson vestments catching the light. His sermon today, as so often, is about sin. And though he never says your name, it feels as if every word is aimed directly at you. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Christianity, gluttony wasn't just a vice. It was a deadly sin. It made the short list right alongside lust, pride, and wrath. The church taught that overindulgence in food, feeding the body while starving the soul, was a mark of spiritual failure. Paintings, manuscripts, and sermons were filled with warnings. A fat belly meant a weak will, and every pound was proof of distance from God. It's not subtle. Thepriest rails against softness of the flesh and excess at the table. He tells stories of saints who lived on roots and water, who denied themselves all comforts in pursuit of holiness. He reminds everyone that the narrow path to heaven requires a narrow waist, or at least the effort to try. Fasting is praised, feasting condemned. When the collection plate passes, you're careful not to take a second piece of bread, knowing the eyes upon you. Historians still argue whether the church's obsession with fasting and food was about health, control, or fear. Some say it was meant to stretch scarce resources. Others believe it was about shaming the body into submission. Either way, the sermons are inescapable. Feast days are laced with guilt, and every meal is a test of virtue. Confession is the church's answer to imperfection. You kneel on cold stone, murmuring your sins through the screen. I ate too much, you whisper. I coveted my neighbor's cheese. The priest assigns penance, prayers, perhaps a fast, maybe alms for the poor. Sometimes the confessor goes further. Remember, he says, the devil tempts through the belly. Your struggle is not just with bread, but with pride and sloth. You nod, promising to do better, but the shame lingers. You walk home under heavy clouds, heart as weighed down as your body. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval penitentials, books of rules for confessors, contained elaborate punishments for gluttony. Eat before the set hour, 50 lashes, steal an extra egg, a week of bread and water. For the rich, indulgence was supposed to offset with charity. For the poor, it was just more hunger. Yet everyone, rich or poor, was warned. Fat was visible sin. Public rituals reinforced the lesson. Lent is a season of daily reminders. No meat. Little fat, plain fare. On Ash Wednesday, ashes mark your forehead, a sign of humility and repentance. Each fast day is an opportunity for self-denial. But if your size doesn't change, the whispers begin. He's cheating. Someone says she's weak, willed, It's not just private guilt, but public suspicion. Historians still debate how strictly people kept these fasts. Records suggest that the wealthy found loopholes, buying dispensations, inventing fake foods from fish and almond milk. For the poor, the fast could mean genuine suffering, another tightening of already starved belts. But the scrutiny is always there, and you feel it keenly. Even a simple meal becomes an act of confession. The churchyard is its own kind of theater. After Mass, villagers gather under ancient yews, discussing the sermon and sharing the latest news. You're greeted with nods and polite words, but you sense the subtext. You've put on weight, someone says. Too much ale at Michaelmas. You laugh along, but inside you're shrinking, wishing for invisibility. Sometimes the jokes are kinder. A child offers you a wild flower. An old woman squeezes your hand. You hold on to these moments like relics, tiny proofs of grace in a world of judgment. And then there are the saints, always thin, always radiant, forever resisting temptation. The stained glass windows show them with hollow cheeks and glowing eyes. Their bodies disciplined into perfect vessels for God's will. No one tells stories of saints who struggled with hunger, who wept over a lost feast, who failed and tried again. The ideal is unwavering. The gap between heaven and earth measured in inches and pounds. Still, there are hints of resistance. In some corners, folk traditions quietly subvert the church's message. There are festivals where food is celebrated, where abundance is seen as blessing, not burden. The harvest feast, the winter solstice, the raucous days before Lent, all moments when people laugh, eat, and remember that life is more than suffering. The priest frowns, but the people sing louder, as if defying the narrow path with every mouthful. Here's another quirky reality. Monastic rules were sometimes stricter than those for the laity, but monks and nuns found ways to feast in secret. The cellars were stocked, the gardens tended, and on feast days, the refectory rang with laughter and clinking cups. Gluttony was still a sin, but humanity, hunger, joy, weakness, always found a way in. The weight of the church's expectations settles deep. You watch your neighbors, some shrinking, some growing, all struggling. You see the piety of thinness, the suspicion of softness. You dream of saints who look like you, who find holiness not by shrinking, but by embracing their own imperfection. Maybe in some forgotten legend they exist. Confession after confession, prayer after prayer, you learn to live with the duality. The church says you are sinful, but the world says you must eat to serve. You exist in the space between, always. Striving, never quite arriving. You find solace in small acts of kindness, in the laughter of friends, in the knowledge that even the harshest sermon cannot measure the softness of your heart. You walk home through the village, past fields golden, with grain, past mothers scolding children, past old men dozing in the sun. You see bodies of every shape and size, all living, all surviving. For a moment, the shame fades, replaced by something like peace. You are here, you're enough, you are part of this world. Night falls, the priest's words echo, but so do the memories of laughter and the warmth of shared bread. You whisper a prayer for strength, not just to resist, but to accept yourself, to find holiness in hunger and fullness alike. You lie down, heart quiet, body tired, and let the darkness come. Tomorrow the church will preach again, but tonight you belong to yourself. The world quiets after Sunday, but as the days crawl on, you become sharply aware of an even deeper wound, the myth of jolly fatness. If you're heavier in the Middle Ages, people expect you to be the punchline, the comic relief, the source of easy laughter and bottomless cheer. But behind the jokes and the forced smiles, you know this role is a prison with iron bars, a costume you never chose but must wear all the same. Let's set the stage. The marketplace, mid-morning, crowded and bustling. Vendors cry their wares. Chickens dart between feet. Children play in the dust. Someone spots you from across the square and waves, calling out a rhyme about the happiest belly in the village. If you frown, you're scolded. Don't be sour, big lad. Give us a smile. If you laugh, you're rewarded with a pat on the back and another joke, sometimes at your expense. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval literature and art are full of comic. Fat men. Friar Tuck in the Robin Hood dailies. Full staff in Shakespeare's later works himself, drawing from earlier traditions. Jolly cookbooks and bumbling peasants. In Mama's plays and church pageantses, the plump character is almost always the fool, the glutton, the one who trips over his own feet. He's rarely evil, but he's never wise. Audiences are meant to laugh with him, but more often they laugh at him. You become skilled at self-deprecation, the master of the roast and the butt of it all at once. You tell the jokes first. Careful, don't get caught in my shadow, because you know what happens if you don't. The laughter of the crowd is a shield and a sword. As long as you're smiling, you're safe. But on quiet days, when the square empties and you walk home alone, you feel the weight of every harmless word. Historians still argue whether this myth ever provided true protection. Some say the jolly fat man was beloved, welcomed at every table, showered with good cheer. Others point out the loneliness, the shallow friendships, the way real feelings were buried under a pile of jokes. The record is mixed. Stories of beloved cooks and good-hearted friars, balanced by darker tales of scapegoats and mockery. Here's a quirky tidbit. In medieval festivals, misrule was a common theme. Days when peasants played lords, fools became kings, and the world turned upside down. The Lord of Misrule was often the largest, loudest man in the village, chosen to lead the parade, crowned with rags and straw, cheered by all. For one wild day, your size is celebrated. But when the festival ends, you go back to being a joke. The crown gone, the burden's heavier than ever. In private, the pressure to perform never lets up. At home, you are expected to be the peacemaker, the one who diffuses arguments with laughter, who never gets angry, never complains. If you have a bad day, people mutter, "What's wrong with him? He's usually so merry." No one wants to see the sadness, the frustration, the loneliness that lies beneath the mask. Worse, your true pain becomes invisible. If you struggle with aching joints, breathlessness, or exhaustion, you're told to rest your jolly self. When you try to express sorrow, the answer is a pie, a mug or fail, another round of jokes. Real comfort is rare. Most prefer the comfort of your performance. Romantic prospects are shaped by this myth too. The comic fat man is never the lover, only the matchmaker or the friend. Your tenderness, your longing are treated as absurd. Who'd want a bear for a bow? Someone laughs. Even if you find a partner, the expectation is that you'll be content with what you get, grateful for scraps, never asking for more. The same goes for women. If you're larger, you're expected to be motherly, never mysterious or seductive. Sometimes you rebel. You keep your silence when a joke is made or answer with a cold stare. But this too is dangerous. Without the mask, you're accused of being bitter or hard to get along with. The myth is sticky, clinging to your skin. Every attempt to shed it is met with resistance. Here's another quirky fact. Medical writers in the Middle Ages sometimes claimed that happy people were more likely to be plump, linking body shape to temperament. The four humors theory described sanguine types as cheerful and round. It sounds almost flattering until you realize it's just another excuse to pigeonhole you. Your feelings, your pain, your struggles are erased by the diagnosis. Of course he's jolly, just look at him. The church too is complicit. In sermons, gluttons are warned to repent. But sometimes, the fat man is a cautionary clown. The one who learns the hard way, whose comeuppance is part of the lesson. Medieval morality plays feature the belly god, a foolish sinner who must be humbled before being forgiven. You see these stories and wonder, will you ever be allowed to be more than a joke? Still, there are small moments of defiance. You laugh on your own terms, sharing stories with friends who understand. Sometimes you find a true companion, someone who sees past the mask and holds your hand when the world gets too loud. You seek out others like you, building quiet alliances, swapping tales of real sorrow and real joy. The myth persists, but you grow wise to its limits. You learn that true jolly is rare, that the most gregarious people are often the loneliest. You see through the forced smiles, the hollow laughter, the demands for performance. Sometimes you slip away from the crowd, finding peace in a quiet corner, a walk through fields, a moment of solitude by the fire. Historians still debate whether anyone in the Middle Ages truly escaped the myth. Some records speak of wise, fat men, beloved for their advice, their generosity, their kindness. But for most, the mask never fully comes off. Your dreams are haunted by laughter, not always kind. But you keep moving, keep hoping, keep searching for those who see you, truly see you. Maybe one day the world will tire of the joke, and you'll be free to simply be yourself. Neither clown nor cautionary tale, but a person in full. You end each day as you began it, aware of the eyes, the expectations, the heavy mask of jolly fatness. But you hold tight to your small joys, your real friends. The truth that laughter, true laughter, comes not from mockery, but from understanding. And so you move forward step by step through the marketplace, the feast hall, the shadowed lanes. You learn to measure your worth, not by the laughter you provoke, but by the love and respect you earn. In the end, you find your peace, not in the myth, but in the quiet, stubborn dignity of simply being yourself. Even if you've learned to live with the daily jokes and the myth of jolly fatness, there's always a darker threat lurking in the corners of medieval life, the constant fear of disease and the superstitions that grow up around it. In an age before antibiotics, before any understanding of cholesterol or blood pressure, the medieval mind turned to rumor, folk medicine, and religious fear to explain why some bodies suffered more than others. If you were fat, your body became a canvas for every dread diagnosis, a walking warning sign, a magnet for the worst suspicions. Let's begin with the basics. In the Middle Ages, nearly every unexplained illness was blamed on imbalanced humors. The sentient theory inherited from Hippocrates and Galen divided the human body into four main fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Each person's temperament and health supposedly depended on keeping these fluids in the right proportion. A heavy, soft body. Surely the learned men said that must be an excess of phlegm or gross blood. Your body was proof enough. Mainstream historical fact. Physicians believed that certain types of bodies were prone to specific diseases. Fatness was seen as a risk. If you fell ill, it was expected. The corpulent were thought more likely to suffer from apoplexy, what we'd call a stroke, dropsy, swelling and edema, asthma, or gout. Doctors warned that soft living and indulgence led to blocked vessels, sluggish blood, and corruption of the flesh. You might wake one morning with a cough or a rash, only to have the local wise woman shake her head. Too much fat in the blood. Best eat nettle soup, or bleed a pint. If you struggle to catch your breath after a climb, the whispers start. It's the weight, it's the humors, he's doomed. Sometimes the advice is simple. Less food, more fasting, more prayer. Sometimes it's bizarre. Sleep with a head of garlic under your pillow or walk backward to confuse the sickness. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval towns had plague wardens who sometimes targeted heavier bodies as a source of contagion. During outbreaks, the overweight were urged to stay home or even in some cases barred from certain gatherings. The logic was less about germs unknown then that about the fear of bad air and visible signs of ill health. Historians still debate whether these biases made any real difference to medical outcomes, or simply added another layer of shame. Did fatter people die more often, or were they just blamed more loudly when death struck? Some chronicles record thin and fat alike carried off by fever or plague. Others focus on the sins of the flesh as a warning to those who survived. The remedies for fat diseases could be cruel. Bloodletting was common. Leeches, knives, or crude glass cups, each promising to lighten the blood and restore balance. You might be prescribed long, sweaty walks, vomiting potions, harsh purgatives, or endless herbal teas brewed from bitter roots. If you could afford a doctor, he'd write up a regimen. Sleep on hard boards, avoid red meats, skip the evening meal, wash in cold water, pray for forgiveness. If you couldn't afford one, you endured the advice of every neighbor, most of it contradictory. Sometimes you'd hear legends of miracle cures. A hermit in the next county who's weeded off his bulk and now danced like a boy. A nun who lived only on air and faith, her body growing ever slimmer and holier. But for you, the reality is aches and breathlessness, swollen joints, skin that burns in summer and chafes in winter. The healer shrugs, your family frets, the priest scolds. No one really knows what to do. There is a special terror in times of pestilence. When the Black Death comes, or any of its many lesser cousins, the blame game intensifies. Heavier bodies, already marked by suspicion, become scapegoats. He's too soft to survive, they whisper. Or worse, she brought sickness with her greed. Your body becomes a symbol, a scapegoat, a warning wrapped in flesh. Something to fear, something to blame. But in the quiet spaces of history, there are other stories small, glowing fragments of hope, records of those who outlasted famine, endured plague, survived long winters on what others mocked. And sometimes the same villagers who once laughed, they envy you in the hard years. You'll outlive us all, they mutter, half a joke, half a prayer. Old folktales whisper of the fat farmer who floated in floods, the plump widow who saved her village with flour hidden in her cellar. Sometimes your size becomes magic, a twist in the tale, a survivor's edge. But for every tale of triumph, there are 10 warnings. Change, or you'll end up like Roger, bloated, mocked, alone. Romance shrinks in the shadow of such fear. A mother warns, marry strength, not softness. For women, softness is worse. It's ruin. It's barrenness. It's a womb spoiled by indulgence. They offer cures, bitter herbs, whispered prayers, and sometimes worse. But in the end, what heals is never just medicine. It's love. It's care. It's the quiet act of enduring. You pray, you bargain. And some days, you fight without lifting a hand. Let them talk. You'll outlast them yet. On the hardest days, you feel like a warning. But on the best days, you remember the truth. Your body is not a curse. It's a vessel, a memory, a shelter. The sun warms your back. The bread tastes good. A laugh breaks free. And someone leans on your arm, not because you're a burden, but because you're steady. Because you're still here. The scorn still stings. But you've learned. You've endured. And now, quietly, you begin to claim something back bit by bit. An extra bite of food. A second serving of joy. A seat at the table you were told not to take. Not rebellion with banners, but resistance in the smallest things. A life lived unapologetic ally. And this time you don't apologize for it. At the market, you laugh louder, not at yourself, but at the absurdity of the world. When someone lobs an old joke, save some for the rest of us. You answer with a new one, or with silence, refusing to perform. Maybe you learn to sew a tunic that actually fits, even if it means patching and piecing scraps in secret. You start to walk your own way through the village. Not faster or smaller, just steady, letting the world adjust to your pace for once. Historians still argue whether any of this counts as real rebellion. Some say the Middle Ages were full of silent resistors, people who carved out lives on the margins, finding little ways to subvert the order. Others insist the pressure was too great, the conformity too absolute for any true defiance. The truth, as you discover, lies somewhere in between. Each act of dignity, however small, feels like a step away from invisibility. Mainstream historical fact: medieval society depended on conformity. To thrive or even just survive, people had to cooperate, to play their roles, to fit in. But there were always those who quietly bent the rules. Traders who dealt outside the guilds, women who ran businesses behind their husbands' names, peasants who hunted forbidden deer, and yes, men and women who refused to shrink themselves just to please a crowd. You become adept at seeing these small acts of resistance in others too. The widow who fills her bowl without waiting for permission. The tanner's son who wears his patched hose proudly, daring Ganyan to call him lazy. The carpenter's daughter who dances at the festival, spinning with joy, hips swaying despite the laughter. Even the priest in an unguarded moment shares a glass of ale with you after a hard day's work. No sermon, just two souls sharing a little warmth against the cold. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval towns celebrated fools' holidays or misrule. Festivals where the lowest became the highest. The thin played the fat and vice versa. On those days, even the biggest bodiest could mock the lords, wear the crowns, and dance in the streets if only for a night. For a moment, the world was upside down, and in that reversal, you tasted something like freedom. In the home, the rebellion is quieter, but just as real. You teach your children to bake the bread they love, not the bread that earns approval. You tell stories of heroes who look like them, not just the ones in the stained glass. You cherish your partner's touch, not because they ignore your size, but because they love it, claim it, choose it again and again. You begin to seek out places where you're not a spectacle. A quiet field, a bench by the river, the warmth of the kitchen after the others have gone to bed. In those spaces you stretch out, breathe deep, and remind yourself that your body is not a problem to solve, but a vessel for living. A home as deserving as any other. The community's expectations may never change completely, but slowly you start to shape the space around you. When the gossip grows loud, you answer it with kindness or with strength. When the jokes sting, you shield those younger than you from their sharpest edges. Sometimes you even win a few over. Neighbors who discover you're a better farmer, a wiser friend, a more faithful companion than anyone gave you credit for. Historians debate whether these quiet resistances mattered in the grand scheme, but for you, each one is a victory. And as you age, you notice something else. The standards that once seemed so rigid begin to soften, if only for a moment. As new generations rise, maybe your niece finds pride in her strength, refusing to shrink herself to fit someone else's idea of worth. Maybe your son, gentle and brave, chooses love over legacy, marrying for joy instead of approval. Maybe the neighbor who once laughed the loudest now knocks quietly, asking for advice when his own child is mocked. All eyes come in surprising forms. A traveling minstrel singing ballads of odd, forgotten heroes. A healer who whispers, all flesh is clay. Each vessel, its own miracle. Even the grumpy baker who saves you the biggest loaf when no one's watching, a quiet rebel. In his own way. Here's a curious fact. In some towns, the fat man's chair was real. Sturdy, wide, kept in taverns like a relic chest part. Honored out a seat for those who didn't fit the mold, but held stories, laughter, and quiet endurance. But even honored seats don't stop the hard days. The days where the jokes cut too deep. Where the stares ache. Where simply existing feels like too much. On those days, let yourself rest. Light a candle. Say a prayer for your heart. Remember the times you stood tall, even when the world wanted you small. Historians may debate whether anyone ever truly escaped the weight of shame. But you know, dignity is not granted, it's reclaimed, moment by moment. In your clothes, in your posture, in every step where you choose your own story over the one they wrote for you. And you realize now, rebellion doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's choosing joy. Eating the food you love without apology. Taking up space at the table, dancing because the music calls you. Sometimes rebellion is kindness to yourself, forgiving the ignorance around you, turning the page again and again. The world may not change fast enough, but you, beautiful and battered, have learned how to stay. To laugh, to grieve, to love and to live. Not in spite of your body, but through it. Tonight, as the fire dims and the village slips into silence, you sit by the window, watching stars drift across the dark. The fears are still there, but softer now. You know your worth. You know who you are. Somewhere, a child laughs. A mother hums. A dog barks down the lane. Life continues. And so do you. Let it all fall away now. The mockery, the stares that groaned. Let your breath settle. Let your shoulders soften. You've traveled far through feast and famine, through shame and resistance. Every step a thread in this strange, stubborn tapestry of life. Remember this. Someone before you also felt out of place. And they kept going. They found warmth. They found kindness. They found belonging. In small, quiet places. Maybe the world never made space for your body. But tonight, here, in this stillness, you are enough. Let the last worries rise like smoke from the embers. Let them drift. Let them go. The night is long. But you're not alone. All sleep beneath the same stars. Each of us carrying stories. Each of us still here. Tomorrow waits. A new beginning. Another slow, strange journey. Sweet dreams from sleepy epoch.